Hello and good evening. What we're going to talk about today is like imagery. It's one of my, arguably 10 years ago, my area of expertise because this is my thesis. I'll just, I'll read you the the title to my MSc thesis, which is The Interactive Effect of Pre-Imagery Activation States and Individual Differences on the Efficacy of Imagery in Bouldering Tasks. I'll probably explain it in a bit more detail as we go on, but effectively, what we, whenever we do imagery, we tend to get people to try and relax first and then do the imagery. And there's a model that I'm going to introduce later on called the Peplet model, which suggests that we should instead be functionally activated to an equivalent level to what we are in sport. So that's what my thing looked at, was whether or not we could, being relaxed or raising somebody's pulse rate to the same as what it would be bouldering, would be more or less effective. But also it was based on the individual differences, being whether people are high or low at imagery, like good or bad at imagery. So we split them into high and low, or whether they had higher levels of emotional stability stroke neuroticism. And the idea is if somebody it's like an international personality pool. So it's one of the main personality types is, and we found very slight kind of converging, but wasn't statistically significant. Let's let me do this a second, and that needs to be okay. And so this what we're looking at now. This is actually a copy of like the early pre-publication copy PDF of my book, How to Climb Harder. It gets laid out a little differently. This was before like the layout, so this is the same page. And so yeah, a lot of this is actually in that book, and we're just going to kind of go through some of the very basics. So one of the reasons that imagery is often seen as being so powerful is that when they look at it, 90% of athletes that they question report using imagery. And as such, it's become one of the most researched areas. And there's all sort of different things, sort of like internal versus external imagery, kinesthetic sort of feelings and stuff like that. But essentially, imagery was first used as a form of therapy, I think, in the 60s or the 70s, as a form of fear aversion therapy. So what they would do is they'd get you to be really, really relaxed. So they do a kind of a progressive muscle relaxation, which you can see from yesterday's thing. And then they get people to imagine the fearful stimuli. And that's possibly where the concept of being relaxed, but generally most people are better off when they're relaxed when it comes to imagery. And every time I kind of give a script, it's up to you whether you keep your eyes open or closed. But essentially, the best way to kind of understand imagery is to basically, we'll go down. Oh, no. We'll start with this first one, and it's basically we're going to imagine ourselves walking into our house. So what we want to do to start off with is just take a couple of minutes to try and relax. So what we're going to do is try the 3, 4, 7 breathing. So we breathe in for 3. hold 7, and then so breathe in. And just keep that nice, slow, relaxed breathing. And what I want you to do is imagine yourself walking up your road towards your house. As you approach the door, you're going to reach your key into the lock and open it and enter through the door. As you walk into the house, you're going to head to your bedroom and sit down on the bed. That is a very, very basic imagery script. Everybody should have, some people can control the image a bit more than others, but it's, again, this is the start and you only get better by practice. And so what we want to do is ask, what did you experience? So for some people, you would have seen it like you were first person. So you would have seen it through your own eyes. You would have maybe seen your hand reach the door and open it. Or you could have seen it like somebody was filming you from a third person perspective. The way I describe it is it's like a documentary film crew is following you about. Now, these are two different perspectives in imagery. And what research has shown is that, in bouldering tasks anyway, is that external imagery with some kinesthetic, and we're going to go into the kinesthetic in a bit, is better than internal imagery or external imagery alone. And external is better than internal. So basically, if you can apply internal and kinesthetic. Now, what is kinesthetic then? So as you were performing that, and if you want to, go back and replay the beginning and go through the process of the imagery script again. And as you entered the house, did you notice, did you have to open a door handle? Did you feel the door handle? Was it cold to the touch? Were there any smells as you entered the house? Did it feel nice and comfortable as you sat down on your bed? Those sort of feelings, smells and sensations are what we call kinesthetic. And so what we want to do when it comes to sort of climbing is try and focus on external imagery and kinesthetic imagery. If you can't manage to imagine yourself from a third person perspective, then internal imagery and kinesthetic is okay. It's just, we know that through research into bouldering that kinesthetic is better, and I'll go into more details as to the sort of the what we know about the differences. It's quite amazing. So what we're going to do now is another little imagery sort of thing. So we're just going to sit down, going to take nice. Okay, so this time, what I want you to do is either with your eyes closed or with your eyes open, is to take a minute to imagine the color blue. And what I want you to do is to take a minute or two just to explore that image. Are there any, what is it you're imagining? Does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Now, some people, they will imagine a swimming pool or a nice blue sea. And sometimes that can be associated with the heat, or sometimes they might see a deep blue, dark blue kind of cold sea and they might feel cold. What is important here is there are no right or wrong answers. When I ask you to imagine just the blue colour, people are going to imagine different things. And so this is important, like how you imagine something is not going to be how somebody else is. And so it's going to be very individualized. There is another one in my book, and it's basically a script around imagining making a cup of coffee. I suggest you don't use a hot kettle when you're doing this, but the idea is that we also know that if we include props, so if you had a spoon, if you had the coffee and you had a cup and a kettle, you would have a much more vivid imagery experience than if you didn't. And so there's an argument that if you visualize at the crag or at the climbing wall with your climbing equipment on, it will be more vivid and more realistic. And it's a way that you can help nurture the imagery process. This is a bit of a thing. What I'm going to do is I won't dwell on this much, and I'll probably do another one when I've copied it out. But this here kind of shows you how to, it talks about making a basic story of being ready to climb. So preparing to climb, you're excited, nervous, and confidence, and then we're going to sort of add some actions and emotions, and then we're going to refine the script. So sat down on the bouldering mat, I feel nervous and excited, and I rub my boots and clean until they squeak under my thumb. Chalking up my hands, I start to prepare. So we've put in some propositions that we're both nervous and excited. We've rubbed our boots till they squeak clean, so we should be able to hear that. And then, we're focusing on success in this next thing, so we're sort of relaxed concentration. And so slowing down my breathing, I feel myself relax and tension leave my body as I concentrate. So that's sort of like adding some emotions, but the actual script ends up with taking a few deep cleansing breaths. I relax and let the tension leave my body as I concentrate on the finishing jug. And then the next bit becomes, as I take hold of the starting holds, I feel the rough grip under my fingers and the tension starting to build in just the right muscles in readiness for the climb. And so basically there is a process of where you can make your own imagery scripts. And the idea would be like, you can write them down, but if you have the, if it's say an imagery script of a route that you're trying to project, you can write it down to start with, but you'd be much better off if you can play it in your head rather than read it. So if you have the ability just to record it into an MP3 and play it back through headphones, you'll find that listening to a imagery script is more effective than trying to read it. So in terms of how we can apply this, if we go back up, you could try to start with to devise, if we go back to the example that I used at the beginning of all of these mental skills, when we looked at self-efficacy and then relaxation, is we looked at like trying to break somebody's kind of fear of clipping. And so we could use this and think to ourselves, well, what do we want to do? We want to start with somebody getting into a position to clip. So they're climbing, they get into a position. Now, what we might want to do is put into the imagery script that we want them to try and find 2 foot holds in a nice balanced position and a good hold to clip from. That might not be possible, but you get people to imagine this tripod because they've got 2 feet and a hand on, and then they're going to clip with this hand, and then you will put in if you looked at that person who was kind of shaking, what we do is like maybe get them to reach a position, you let out a large relaxing breath and let your shoulders drop as you reach down for the rope and bring it up and see yourself clipping the rope effortlessly into the quick draw. And so we can build, as well as actual physical things like clipping a quick draw, we can also focus on what we call the emotional responses we want. So a bit like what imagery was used for, i.e. overcoming fear, what we want people to do is be really relaxed beforehand. So you really want to focus on that relaxation, and then imagine yourself in that scary situation of being pumped out of your tiny mind at the top of the route and you've got to clip. And there are so many different things you could get people to imagine how they're going to tie into belays. There is so much. And so one of the key things I think is imagery allows us to practice away from when we would normally be climbing. So it allows us to practice when we're not at the climbing wall, which is a massive thing for us. Which scene is it? Not that one. And so there is a lot more to this. Now, these are just a few examples. This is one model of imagery. It used sort of like neuroscience backgrounds, and it's called the PEPLET model. It stands for physical, environmental, task, timing, learning, emotion, and perspective. And effectively, what it suggests is that an imagery script needs to take into account all of these things. So imagery should incorporate the physical sensations associated with things such as muscle tension, breathing, and heart rate. And so we need to have a physical thing. We know that if we use imagery in a setting that resembles the performance environment, so if you're an indoor climber, or if you're an outdoor climber, and using it at the crag is going to be more effective. It should also focus on like a specific task. I really find imagery useful for starting to remember complete sequences. It is better to start off with sequences of boulder problems than it is an entire route. And we also know that, definitely bouldering is external visual imagery with the kinesthetic, whereas you might find, because it's hard to imagine yourself from that third person's perspective at the on a long route, you might be better in first person. The other is that the timing of the imagery should be performed at the same speed, so don't slow it down or speed it up. And you need to allow the fact that your ability to imagine will evolve, and that to start with, you want to start with some basic skills like just imagine yourself clipping really well in lots of different situations before moving on to a very complex skill. We also know that imagery should have these emotions. We call them like you kind of want to respond to, you want to insert the emotion that you want to feel as much as possible. And then the last one is the perspective. So the perspective's really weird in that, so they put a load of students in a wheelchair, because it was very easy, and they made a track, and they did an imagery intervention, they did an imagery script, and they got half the group to imagine in an internal perspective and half the people to imagine from an external perspective. And one of the interesting results of this was that the people with internal imagery were slower but more accurate, because they're imagining from themselves, so they're seeing how close they are here, because they're looking at their own eyes, they're seeing everything. Whereas the people that are in the external visual imagery had a few more mistakes, so they clipped the edge of the course more, but they engaged with more force, or they actually did better times. And so this is where a lot of the research gets really modelled. Is you wonder how and what to apply to a different sport or a different setting. So some work better with IVI, internal visual imagery, rather than external visual imagery. What we know from at least 2 research papers that used climbing is that I think it was Callow and Hardy, if you're really interested, and Callow and Hardy were 2 of my lecturers. They looked at imagery perspective and bouldering tasks, and what they found is that, like I said, EVR, sort of internal imagery or external imagery on its own, the external imagery was better. But if you couldn't use external imagery, then, still use internal imagery. But the really important one was to add in kinesthetics, so those feelings, the emotional stuff. And if you put in the kinesthetic side as well as, so you feel the tension in your body, that helped make the people that were external imagery and kinesthetic perform better than every other group. And, that was a pretty well researched piece. It's been pretty well accepted in the research. I know that years ago I had a conversation with Neil Gresham, and Neil, when he does imagery, talks about internal imagery, which is very common, and it probably works for Neil. I don't know how much research Neil has done, but the fact that this is one of the most researched subjects and this is what they're saying leads me to believe that external imagery with kinesthetic is much better. And then you can do things. So where are we? Like I've done in my book, there's a whole imagery script for, a whole day. So you sit down, relax, take a minute to slow your breath and let the tension slide from your body. Start to visualize the next day. The sun is rising and breaks through the curtains. Finishing the first cup of coffee of the day, you start to sort through your rack. See yourself meticulously sorting through it, checking all the cams are working smoothly. Feel yourself packing your rack into your rucksack and hear the metal jangle. Waiting for your climbing partner to call, you feel excited at the day ahead. See yourself in the car driving to the cliff, the views, the smells you experience along the way. You arrive in the car park, taking the bags out of the car and feeling their weight as you shoulder them. See yourself standing tall as the rucksack seems weightless to you now. Listen to the sound of your feet crushing the gravel as you walk into the cliff. Feel the sun and wind on your smiling face as you contemplate the perfect day cragging. As you arrive at the racking up spot, you feel yourself taking a few deep breaths and admire the view. You rack up, listening to the seabirds and the sounds of the sea. Absorb every ounce of the situation. You rig the abseil and see yourself confidently abseiling down, enjoying the excitement of the situation. As you start to make the belay at the bottom of the cliff, feel the tension release from your head to your toes. Watch the seabirds soar above, the waves crashing below. There is no better place to be than here. See yourself leaving the belay, looking up at the climb ahead. You can see the way to go, and it looks easy. Watch yourself climbing, feeling the rock under your fingers, and every hold feels like it's a massive ledge. Watch yourself picking the exact size wire for every placement. The feeling of relaxation as each bomber runner is clipped effortlessly into the rope. At the belay, you clip yourself into your bomber anchor, feeling the wind in your hair. You sit back on the belay and start to bring up your second. The birds fly past, admiring your belay, and the sea has become a distant friend, lapping in and out at the foot of the cliff below. As you watch the waves billow in and out, you notice that it's in time with your breathing. As you lead off the last pitch, you know the route is in the bag. Every part of your body feels strong. As you're standing below the final wall, you take time to look back at where you've been, the sights, the sounds, the feel of the rock under your hands. Success is near. You take one last deep breath and commit to the final moves. As you feel the top hold, you confidently move your foot up and perform the perfect mantle onto the top of the cliff. The final push-up brings a feeling of elation and success. You've not just climbed this route, but enjoyed every part of it. It was the best climb of your life. As you bring up the second, you reflect on every part of the day as the sun warms your face and a gentle breeze ruffles your hair. And I just wanted that to show people that is a different way to use imagery. So that was a piece of imagery on going to a sea cliff for the day. And some people find that very stressful, but actually, the more experienced you are, again, that prior performance from the self-efficacy helps buffer this. But in the most part, I think the majority of people will benefit from trying to make a imagery script from a boulder problem that they're projecting. And what you want to include is like every single movement, including the micro movements you might not be aware. So, if you put a toe out on a hole, you want to feel the tension through your whole body, because that's basically what happens. Or it might just be a particular move. Like I always struggled with for a long time, crossing through. I don't know what it was. I'd always feel like I was going to come off. I'd like overbalance off this hold before I got to the next. And again, it just took me a little bit of time of practicing, of using a little bit of imagery to imagine myself crossing through and feeling confidence in my ability to reach the hold. And I think that was my thing, is I was struggling to reach the hold. And what I'd like to offer is, if you'd like to do some more imagery, and we could do that, what I'll do is I'll do one on probably making imagery scripts specifically for routes, and I'll try and think of a boulder problem I can remember, which might be funny. But yeah, there's a process to it. Like I said, there is a thing in the... Yeah, there's this page in this book, little diagram. This little table here. But it will take me a little while to sort of take that out and put it on the web. But I think for the majority of people, what we are looking for is just for you to get your toes in the water and starting to use imagery. Like I say, it's very powerful and people often use it to help them, climb hard routes. For me, I, believe it or not, found it when I was climbing a lot was if I couldn't visualize myself doing a long sequential boulder problem in my mind, I often wouldn't be able to do it, because until I had it right in my mind, I would be fluffing sequences. And so the good thing about imagery is it allows you to practice that sequence in your mind so that you've got it totally dialed. And yeah, that is the very basics of imagery for you. If you have any questions, wherever you saw this, I think it's on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. I do check in that I will also put links to a Discord server where you're more than welcome to add any questions. And if there's anything moving forward that you'd like to know a little bit more on, let me know and we can look into covering it. I was going to do one tomorrow night, but I've got a feeling that I've got a friend coming over, so it might not be on. But again, thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been of help. I have managed to send off the last guidebook that I gave away. I've still got like a box upstairs, so I will try and work out a way that we can do another giveaway for the guidebook. It only cost me £4 to send them, so it's all good. Yep. Have a good evening. Thanks a lot. Oh yeah, and just if you comment whether you'd prefer these during the evening or during the day, let me know. The idea would be eventually, hopefully, we get a few more people, we get some people watching, and whilst I am doing this, I am often just flicking through different the different places I'm streaming to see whether there are any comments, and the idea is I will be able to answer your questions. Thanks again. I am going to sign off and go have my TTs, my din-dins.